Hey, everybody. Welcome to the second Visits with Victor. I'm so grateful for all of you to join us. I'm going to give it a couple of seconds. I'm here joined with Representative Andrés Romero. We will get started here in just a second and have a conversation about education, what our members of Congress should be doing when it comes to our education system, some of the ideas that I have when it comes to addressing education at the federal level. I'm very grateful for all of you for joining us today and taking a little piece of your Saturday morning on this beautiful Saturday morning to do it. I'm very grateful for Representative Romero for giving us a little piece of his time in the midst of a legislative session. For those of you that don't closely follow the state legislature, this is about the time when everything starts getting crazy and there is a million moving pieces. And so I'm very grateful for him to be joining us this morning. It is a big honor for me and I'm very excited. So we'll give it just another couple seconds. So everybody, we're going to get started. Welcome to Visits with Victor number 2. We're going to be talking about education and the role that the federal government should be playing. My name is Victor Reyes. I'm so excited to be joined with each and every single one of you today. Thank you for tuning in for this important conversation. You know, as we talk about what it looks like to build back better and bolder in the wake of COVID-19, we must be ready to really full-heartedly support our educators, support our public schools, make sure every single child has the opportunity to succeed, regardless of their background, regardless of their zip code, and regardless of their family's financial situation. So very excited for this opportunity to get to be here with Andrés Romero. I met Representative Romero 5 years ago now, when we were both working in the state legislature. I was with Conservation Voters New Mexico at the time. He was a freshman legislator. And, we worked together since then on any number of issues when it came to addressing the opportunity gap that holds our students back. We worked together to pass the education moonshot in the governor's first legislative session in 2019. Representative Romero was a key partner in making sure that the change that we've been seeing, the positive movement forward in the direction of education at the state level. He has been an ally to that. So I'm really grateful for him joining us today on Visits with Victor number 2. Welcome, Representative Romero.
Great. No, it's great to be here, Victor. Thank you so much for having me. It'll be awesome to spend this time with you and everybody watching. Hi, everybody.
So I guess, Representative Romero, I wanted to start off by just asking you what you feel are the biggest challenges and issues facing New Mexico when it comes to our education, and how the federal government can be a partner in the efforts to address those issues and overcome those barriers.
I certainly appreciate that question. I think as far as the state, and it's not unlike a lot of other states that are having a hard time recruiting and retaining teachers, and having teachers that are reflective of the students that they teach and truly understanding of the students' cultural backgrounds, and really incorporating that into their lessons. I think that another thing that we need to be working a lot harder on is ensuring that we have adequate funding for our schools. We've started it with the governor's moonshot two years ago, and we're continually ramping it up. But it's a process in really recruiting and retaining our existing workforce, but also starting to rebuild after so many years of neglect in our system. And I think that's one place where the federal government can really help out is like they've done with the stimulus package the couple of stimulus packages last year in providing additional funding for schools to continue to operate and operate safely if they so choose. I think one thing that the federal government in that money, when we deal with it at the state level, I think the federal government should include even stricter maintenance of effort clauses with that money. So maintenance of effort is basically making sure that the states continue to fund their schools the same way and in the same way for the same services, despite federal money, because that federal money is really there to supplement state funding, not to supplant it.
No, I think that's critical. And, any budget that I support in Congress needs to make sure that they're having direct investments into the schools that need it the most. The schools that serve the Martinez Yazzie kids are low income school districts, are school districts that teach English language learners, Native American students, our special education students, which we cannot afford to leave behind in that process. And that's something that I'm committed to doing in Congress, and making sure that any budget that we look at includes those direct investments. And you're right, supports, not supplants, the efforts that are happening at the state level. But I also think that, the federal government is not taking adequate responsibility when it comes to achieving the goals that we are setting out for our education system. So I appreciate that perspective. When we talk about recruiting, retaining, and supporting educators, I think salaries and making sure that our educators, that our educational assistants are paid a living wage, I think is a critical component of that. What other types of efforts should I be looking for in Congress to make sure that we are really supporting, recruiting, retaining, doing everything we can to make sure we're filling that bucket of support?
Yeah, definitely. I think you pointed out salaries is always a key issue, right? And that's across the board in the United States, right? That that teachers are paid a lower wage than in a lot of other high performing countries that are doing really well. So salaries is one of them, certainly. Creating a career ladder, so that we have in the state, I know you're well aware of and you've helped work on, is the Grow Your Own Teachers Act, right? Is taking, allowing educational assistants like my wife. My wife started out as an educational assistant, and then she went and got her teaching license and became a teacher and has been teaching for 7 years now. But making sure that there is this sort of assistance and this career ladder and this career trajectory, so that we continue to take our educational assistants and have them become our teachers, because these educational assistants are from the community and are more often than not from that community in which they're working. So having that career ladder for them to become teachers, but then teachers into administrators, and creating those opportunities for our best teachers with a lot of experience to go into becoming administrators and principals at our school and even within our district, but really trying to keep them at the school site so that we can have that career ladder for our educators. And it's really to the benefit of our students, because when you have good teachers, when you have a good administration, you're going to keep that community together. You're going to keep those teachers there, and everybody's going to be working really well, like they typically do and always do, for the best of our students.
No, I think that's critical. And I think that that's one place where the federal government can be supporting. Very proud of the work that we've done here at the state level to pass Grow Your Own Teachers legislation. Yourself, Representative Garrett, very, very excited to see all the work that we've been able to do during this administration to really get that off the ground. I think we need to continue to support those efforts at the federal level. And that is the type of funding that you're talking about, that supports, not supplants. It's making sure that we're doing that. And, educational assistance, people don't realize the low level of wages that they see every day. They get a raise, and then their health insurance costs go up. And so that's I think I was reading, and you can correct me, but it's something like they see $250 per pay period in their paychecks. I mean, that is for people who we are looking to have a direct role in educating our children. That's nowhere near enough. And so I think Grow Your Own Teachers programs are part of that. I love that what you were talking about when it comes to making sure that we are also creating pathways of opportunity when it comes to having educators become administrators as well, because I think that perspective is critically important in that piece of the puzzle. And so I appreciate that. I wanted to ask you, we work together with a coalition of other legislators and the administration to pass some community schools legislation in the 2019 legislative session. For those of you that don't know, community schools are centers and that provide wraparound services for so many of our students and their families. So they can provide anything from behavioral health resources, traditional school-based health center support, but also things like GED programs for parents of the students who are looking for these types of opportunities. And I think that one of the things from a federal level that I really think we need to do to look at addressing the opportunity gap is to aggressively invest in a community school expansion early on. And I think that that's something that I think the Biden administration has been looking at as one of the first steps that they want to take. What do you think about that effort?
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic that this community schools that has been around in New Mexico for a number of years now is really starting to catch on, because we know that healthy schools are within healthy communities, and that everything is really interlinked within the community. And so another benefit that these community schools do is that they're really linking students and families with things that they need. If they need help with health services, like you mentioned, if they need help with food or applying for federal assistance, like these community schools and the community coordinators that work within these community school framework are all doing that sort of work that's getting students what they need so that they can be successful in the classroom. That isn't necessarily classroom related, but is definitely related to their overall well-being. And when students are healthy and they're getting enough sleep and they're financially secure, and they're going to be able to perform much better. And actually, at the school that I teach at Etrisco Heritage Academy High School, we have a family center that supplements a lot of the work that community schools does. And the women that work in our family center do everything. They help families with translation services. They hold English classes for families. They do their monthly food drive. They have a food pantry for our students. They help students and families navigate payment plans for their bills. So it's super, super important because, like I said, healthy students, fed students that are comfortable are going to perform better in the classroom and be able to devote their full attention to their studies. So it's of the utmost importance, and I have the utmost confidence that in Congress you'll be an advocate for such services that's so desperately needed in all schools. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Representative. You have my commitment that I'll fight like hell to make that a reality. I wanted to ask, as an educator, what does the opportunity gap look like when you see your students? What are some of the challenges that they're facing that are standing in the way of that world-class education that we know that that every student deserves? What does that look like for you in your classroom?
Yeah, I think that's a good question about the opportunity gap and what that looks like kind of on the ground. I mean, I think that a lot of students live in multi-generational families. Their structure, they have to help their little brother and sister, especially with remote learning now, is that I have a lot of students that'll have to help little brother and sister log on to their class, to help them with their assignments, to find packets for them. And even during non-pandemic times they'll have to, I teach 11th graders, so a lot of them drive or are starting to drive, so they'll be the ones responsible for dropping their little brother or sister, or even cousins off at school and may miss first period. It also means that we have students that are going without, are food insecure. We have students that are also, their parents are having a hard time paying the bills. And that's why these wraparound services are really important for students, to be able to provide that for students so that they can take care of their immediate needs and be able to do the best in their classroom. But I also think it takes experienced educators in our in our Title I schools to really work with students and get them what they need to be successful in the classroom, and truly understanding and having educators from their community teaching these students as well, so they can see, the students see themselves in their educators. Like, I teach at the school that's 10 minutes up the road from my house, and from 15 minutes from where I grew up and where I went to school. So I think it's having that sort of understanding too of the students and their situation and compassion, but also being there to encourage them on and make sure that they're getting the what their basic needs served, but also their educational needs, and holding them to the same standards as you would anybody else, and providing them with the same type of education, but providing for them on the front end and being understanding of that as well.
You know, earlier today you mentioned, well-fed students. And I know that the issue of hunger in our schools and the students that our schools are serving is something that was heightened during the pandemic. I was part of the team that was working to address meal delivery and drop-off sites and pickup sites to make sure that our students who relied on school lunch programs had that type of access moving forward. It came with any number of challenges, but I think that that's something that we can't lose sight on, is that too many of our students are going to school hungry. And oftentimes it's educators like yourself that are responsible with making sure that they have whatever nutritional support that they can get a hold of. Another reason why I truly believe community schools are important. Is that something that you're seeing, especially in the school that you serve? Is that something, hungry students, is there more that we could be doing to make sure that we're meeting those students' nutritional needs?
Yeah, I think, within a lot of school districts, they have breakfast before the bell, to provide breakfast for students. Certainly, lunch is there, but then there are also things like being able to fund family homework dinners has become a big thing. Being able to provide a meal for families and have educators there in order to help them with their schoolwork. I think another thing too that gets overlooked with a lot of educators, I know a lot of my colleagues, a lot of colleagues I've talked to around the state do, and I certainly do in my classes, going and buying snacks for students. And I just pass it out, students have it. I have a snack drawer. They know that they can come see me, whatever they need. But again, like at the school that I teach at, we have that family center that is able to, it's even above and beyond what community schools does, in the sense that they provide these services immediately, and they provide clothing as well for students. So I think not only community schools, but things like family centers within the school that provide those things at a moment's notice for our students that are in need. But I think these are pretty basic things that sometimes definitely get overlooked in our school. And when they get overlooked, that typically means that they don't get funded and the programming isn't there in order to meet those needs. So I think you're hitting on a really important issue that certainly strikes a chord in a lot of different schools, because we see this with a lot of different schools, but I think it's something that needs to be addressed, and very well could be at the school site.
And Representative, you've been a leader when it comes to adult education. I know I've heard you several times on the House floor and in committee speak about adult education and the important role that plays. What do you think are the gaps there? What more can we be doing? What kinds of initiatives do you think that the federal government should be leaning into to provide that support for our adult students?
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent question. I mean, certainly getting at the heart of college tuition, and making not just college or job retraining um, free and easily accessible for people that wish to. If there's one thing that I've seen during this pandemic is a lot of people looking that have lost their jobs looking into job retraining, and typically that comes with a price tag for a lot of people. So making sure that that's cheap, free, accessible for people in those efforts. You know, in the state, we have the College Affordability Endowment Fund that allows, you know, students and adults to be able to get part of their college tuition paid for by being able to tap into this fund. And I think that goes a long way. And we're seeing many students, we're seeing many adults being able to tap into this fund in order to continue their education or look at job training or certification.
Yeah, and I think that we definitely need at the federal government to be investing more in making sure that the reality of higher education is met, right? With it, we can offer free public colleges, public college and university tuition for every single student, that we are eliminating student loan debt, federal student loan debt off the books. Because we see that in, communities of color, students of color that come out of this debt, they're inhibited from achieving financial security early on. I saw this in my own life, that you get out of school, you're trying to get on sound financial footing, and yet you have this mounting debt that you're trying to chip away at, but it doesn't really ever seem to go away. And I think that's critical, making sure that we are looking at how we can cover the full cost of attendance for job training programs that we have in our community, apprenticeship programs that we have in our community, that we're able to capitalize on, the different and expanding workforce needs that we're seeing rapidly in any number of sectors, whether it be renewable energy or whether it be, the cyber tech industry that, we're looking at developing here in state. I also think that, one of the things that we need to be looking at is ensuring that educators, that are serving, that we are doing everything we can to make sure that we are addressing directly whatever educational commitments and obligations they have left of as far as debt goes when it comes to higher education. And so I think that's something that we've really at the federal level failed to kind of look at and really make those key investments on. And I'm hoping that's something that this Congress can act on quickly. And I'll definitely do everything I can to make sure that that's a reality.
Yeah, no, that would be super important, because I think that certainly being able to, especially with our students, being able to integrate the businesses that they have in their particular area and educating them in a way that they're going to be employable out of school or later on in life, that if they want to have a change in career, do something different, that they're able to be able to do that in a way that's effective and cost effective for them, and certainly free and attainable. And I think certainly for a large group of people, me as a millennial, relieving college loan debt would go a long way in helping people do what they want to do and be even more than they're able to, then they're strapped with all this sort of college debt that's hindering them in their potential job prospects. So that would be a big thing to get accomplished.
Absolutely. I'm committed to making it happen. So let's talk about infrastructure at our schools. I think there's definitely an inequity when it comes to the infrastructure needs that we see, depending certainly on zip code. Looking across the district, there's definitely a lot of variables that come into place. When it comes to, one of the issues that we've seen really be heightened in this pandemic is the need to be investing in broadband infrastructure so that our students have connectivity both in the classroom and outside of the classroom, so that they can get the work that they are looking at being asked to complete done. and that they're not falling behind within our systems. Is that broadband need something that you've been seeing and hearing about in your role as the education committee chair and your role as an educator?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Connectivity is definitely an issue. Certainly, you have connectivity issues in the rural areas where the infrastructure doesn't currently exist, and then in urban areas too, like in Albuquerque, we have a lot of students without high-speed internet that may lag. They're going to have to, during my classes, sometimes they have to keep their camera off in order to be able to stay connected within class. They have a hard time keeping documents open while running the meeting. So it's definitely an issue and something we've been working on, starting to fund. And it's interesting because technology, as we all know, is changing so fast and rapidly that there's potential for, satellite connectivity. So instead of broadband and laying that hardwire, potentially looking at satellite connectivity. So it's a really interesting time, but certainly looking, again, it goes back to funding and being able to have the money in order to expand connectivity. Another thing that you've had a problem I think is along the lines of regulation of a lot of these companies as well, because a lot of broadband companies are like little monopolies that it has become incredibly expensive to hook up because they have their territory staked out, and you only have people only have a limited amount of servers to become connected to. So I think that's another issue where the federal government can truly help out is regulating the internet services for people, because I think that's really driving the cost of broadband up for everybody.
I agree. And the other thing that I was thinking about when it comes to infrastructure that I think is critical and that we've seen that we've really, I guess, put an underline on during this pandemic is ventilation systems within our school systems, right? I think one of the things that we need to ensure if we are having educators go back to the classroom and students go back to the classroom is that we have proper ventilation system. People always wonder why it's one of the reasons it's so easy to get sick when you're spending so much time in the classroom is that we've never had adequate ventilation. And that's been a problem for as long as we've been in classrooms. And I think that, we need to make sure that the federal government takes a role in helping states make these investments when it comes to the infrastructure that we are seeing in our school systems long term. That has to be a priority. We can't allow and continue to put our students and our educators in an environment where they're not, frankly, as safe as possible from the fear of getting sick. And I think that's something that's been lacking and that we need to invest in. And I think while we're making those investments, also looking at what are the other pieces that we need to be doing to make sure that every single student has access to a 21st century classroom, whether that's broadband, whether that's making sure that they have the right technology in the classroom, making sure that, books, materials, that's not something that should be coming out of your pocket as an educator. That's something that we as public servants need to be making sure that we are providing to the greatest extent possible for every single educator in classroom.
And I think it's the type of materials too. We hear a lot about like textbooks, but I don't use a textbook in my class, and a lot of the materials that I do pull out are from archives. I teach history, so archives, stock footage. Obviously, the internet's a help with that, but it's expanding. We've had this fight within the state too, is like what constitutes instructional materials that we can spend money on, because some of this archival material isn't free either. So what types of materials that we as educators have access to, and that the types of systems that the students have to work with. Things like manipulatables. I always mess that up. I have to think about it before I say it. But like, my wife's a fine arts teacher, so her materials look a lot different, right? And so since this pandemic, she has to put together boxes of materials that she's able to purchase for the students, pastel crayons, things like this. And notebooks so that they can do art at home. But I think that's something that can certainly extend beyond the pandemic when we do get back into class, is being able to have educators be able to get these materials for students so that they can enjoy these things at home and not just in the classroom as well, and have access to them, I think, is super important. The last thing about then you're talking about ventilation is that's super important. I mean, it's teachers get sick, but a lot of the students get sick a lot of the time, because we're dealing with in one day, if I see all 5 periods of my students, I'm seeing about 120 people. Students are cycling in and out with very little airflow. Luckily, my school is newer, so I do have, like, my outside a door to the hallway, but also windows that I can get the air circulating in. But that's not the case for many of our schools that are built in the 80s, 70s, and a lot of them don't have access to any sort of windows.
Absolutely. And, you're talking about having to pool resources from other places. I think one of the things that I truly want to make sure that we're addressing in Congress is some of the copyright issues that exist around educational materials, to make sure that they are more accessible for everybody who wants to do it, and making sure that we can put into your hands those materials, those culturally relevant materials to the students that you are addressing and that you're facing every single day in the classroom. And so that's something that I think is, we often forget about, is some of those copyright issues. And that is a direct responsibility of the federal government to be addressing. And so definitely something that I'm going to be looking at.
Definitely. I think a lot of librarians will thank you for that too. My wife had been a librarian too. So that would be a welcome for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. My mom was a volunteer in the public schools, and she primarily focused a lot of her time and attention in special education children. That was for her the student population that was closest to her heart. Would commit hours and hours a week to making sure that she was doing everything she could to be there for those students. What types of challenges are you seeing and hearing about in your role with the legislature, in the school that you work in, when it comes to special education students, and what kind of support and what kind of resources should the federal government be fighting for and providing for states in making sure that every single special education student has the best and highest quality of education that we can provide?
No, that's a really good question, and I think something when we talk about Martinez-Yazzie is one of the parts of the lawsuit, as well as what we're doing or not doing for our special education population. I think starting from the ground up is with teacher education, that there isn't a lot of training for educators on special education issues, how to work with our students. Best practices, if we're doing inclusion classes with students, if we're needing other supports for students, and especially advocacy on behalf of the parents, and ensuring that parents know their rights, and understanding what our obligation to their students are as a teacher, and making sure that their IEP plans are being met in full. And really being an advocate for our special education population, ensuring that they're getting the education that they deserve, but certainly providing assistance in terms of finances, in terms of training, in terms of overall awareness of our special education and our special education students, and the needs that they deserve to have met by every educator, and that every educator is properly equipped with being able to meet those needs and understanding of those needs for their population of students.
No, I appreciate that perspective. What am I not asking, Representative, about the challenges that we're seeing in the classrooms? What more can the federal government be doing? I want to make sure that, education is the foundation for everything that we do. And it's critical. And I think now as we begin to think back, building back better, building back bolder with a stronger educational system, what are the things that we should be looking at? What have I missed in this conversation?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And while you were asking that question, I was racking my brain about some of the things we haven't talked about that are important. One thing I think that's really important is we had been talking about wraparound services, but having services for parents, and especially new parents, adequate maternity leave, paternity leave, so that these families can bond with their children, having access to early prenatal and early childhood services, right? Like my wife and I had been a part of a program through St. Joseph's, where we had a home visitor before our first son was born that would come talk to us about the development stage our child was at in the wound, what they could hear, what they were feeling, what my wife should be eating, for reading, things like that to the child in the womb, just so that we were aware of all of these different things. But having access to that is invaluable, and we have a big gap, not only in this state, but I think across the country. But I think I'm a part of a group that of national legislators that is looking at best practices in some of our high performing countries, places like Singapore, Finland, Estonia, what they're doing. And one of the things that has really struck me is all of those services around the family: adequate maternity leave, paternity leave, early childhood services for children, age appropriate materials and education. So it's not this standardized, drill and kill type of standardized testing for the youngest of kids, right? Is that it's all age appropriate, having things that they can work with as students, I think is one thing we hadn't talked about that I think is so important, is that healthy families, healthy people, people that don't have to worry or are food insecure or insecure about in their job or in their money, are going to breed healthy, happy families in the end. And I think it's all those services that contribute to our education system as a whole.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective, because you're right. I mean, the opportunity gap begins even before the child is born. Right. And we need to be doing those wraparound services early on when it comes to early childhood education, early childhood support for parents, making sure that we are providing for universal childcare in this country. The fact that the tuition at the University of New Mexico costs less than what quality childcare in our state costs, and yet there are no Pell Grants, there's no federal support, I think is something that we need to immediately address and change. And whatever we can do to support families early on, make sure that they have the resources they need to be successful in the trajectory of their children's lives. I mean, I think that's a basic responsibility. I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity to work on early childhood issues with the state legislature, whether it was creating the new department that we have that directly focuses on early childhood care, early childhood education, and making sure that we know that is a priority, that we need to be breaking down silos when it comes to the different services that work there. I think we need to be, but the federal government needs to play a direct role. We need to make sure that we are providing for paid family medical leave, and making sure that our parents, when it comes to maternal paternal leave, that's something that they are supported in, because it is clear. And we have a long way to come in this country. And I'm so glad that you are on that task force, or the national group that's looking at this issue, because I think we have a long way to go as a country into addressing those issues. And I'm really grateful for your work on that.
Yeah, no, I certainly appreciate that. And I think that's what's exciting about your campaign is you're really looking at getting the country up to those standards and ensuring that people are truly equal and have equal opportunity to live healthy, prosperous lives for everybody. And I think that's super important, and certainly a breath of fresh air. And I think it's younger people like us that are going to usher in that way, for sure.
I think so too. I think I think that generational perspective has been missing in Congress for a long time. And I think that, having more millennials in Congress, having more younger Americans in Congress, I think is something that is going to serve this country well. It's certainly going to serve this community well, I believe. And I'm committed to bringing that perspective and that voice to Congress. And so I'll just end on that note. Thank you, Representative, for spending so much of your Saturday, your day off, with us all today and talking about these issues. You are a educator in the classroom. You're a national leader on this issue. You lead the conversation at the state legislative level. And so I'm so grateful for having you here today. You have my commitment that I'm going to fight every single moment of the day when I'm in Congress to make sure that our students have the support that they need in the classrooms, that our educators have the support that they need, that we have the wraparound services that we know make a difference into students' everyday lives. Addressing the opportunity gap is going to be the #1 priority for me in Congress. And so thank you again, Representative. It means a lot.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, and best of luck. And I'm happy to support you, Victor.
Thanks so much, Representative. We'll talk soon. Thank you, everyone, for Visits with Victor #2. If you can go and visit me online at victorreyes.org, under issues, you can find out a little bit more about my education plan. If you can volunteer, we would love for you to volunteer. This is important. You heard from Representative Romero the importance of having people of a different generation, of a different voice, people who are clear about the priorities of these issues in Congress. You have my commitment that I will be that voice. And so visit victorreyes.com, sign up to volunteer, make sure that you're sharing my education plan with others that you think need to see it. And we will be in touch for Visit with Victor #3. Thanks, Representative, again. Everyone have a great day. See you soon.